All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Off the Pulpit. I'm here joined by our pastor, Pastor Joe.
Hello.
How are you? Why are you cutting? Why are you coming in earlier than you're supposed to?
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. But today it's exciting because we're actually finally starting up what Off the Pulpit is supposed to be, which is where we take things that we hear on the pulpit for our Sunday sermons and we discuss it and go deeper here off the pulpit.
That's right.
And so today we're going to be starting off on this Sunday. You started off a brand new sermon series. It's going to be a 4-part sermon series, and it's on. What did you call the sermon series itself?
The series is titled Rethinking Love.
Right, yeah.
But before we go into that, what I had planned to do, if I could share, was that I was going to slice the sermon from our live stream and post it on our channel, and then link it to the Off the Pulpit show, so that I could begin by saying, if you haven't, had a chance to listen to, please go listen to the sermon and then tune into our show. Yeah. But this past week, we had some technical issues.
We had some audio technical issues. I don't know why it's only us. I talked to the KM media pastor, and he says, "Oh, it was fine in the morning. I think they're deliberately messing it up. It's a conspiracy.
Sabotage.
Yeah, they're sabotaging. They something wants to stop us. Somebody wants to stop us. No, I'm just kidding.
It's the devil.
But thankfully, our media team they got it under control. We did salvage it towards the middle end of your sermon.
Right.
So hopefully, starting this week, we will not have that issue.
So today, the sermon, we won't be able to connect it because like half of it, there's no audio.
Yeah.
So we'll probably have to do a little deep dive, or not a deep dive, but like a summary of what we discussed Sunday.
Yeah, and then starting next week, hopefully we'll be able to connect it and then go more deeper into it.
Sounds good.
But why don't we start off by explaining what this Sunday sermon was about? Like we said, it was a 4-part sermon series, and it's about you're calling it rethinking love, right? And so why don't you start off by telling us what was your inspiration for this sermon series? Like, why all of a sudden do you want us to rethink love? Is there something going on? No, I'm just kidding.
I see where you're going with this. No, that's not it at all. I think for me, it's a series that I've been thinking about for a long time, because number one, our previous sermon series was, we're coming off of a very long sermon series, right?
Yes.
We began, I believe it was like September or October of 2021.
Yeah.
And we began the Gospel of John.
Yeah.
And we have spent literally a year and a half, slightly longer, in the entire book. And we finished about 2 to 3 months ago. I think it was around January, early or mid-January, so not even that long. But since then, we've been just doing standalones, and I've been praying and I've been thinking hard about what we should talk about. And I've had a lot of ideas. You could imagine for that year and a half.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, I know our members were tired of the series.
At least you know.
I know they were, but they should know, and I confess here only on Off the Pulpit, I was tired of it too.
It's the exclusive. It's the pastor's secrets out here.
Right.
The real heart.
I was really tired of it, So
it was a great series, though. I mean, John is one of the coveted books, gospel books of the Bible, and so I mean, it was a great series, and we call it John's Diary, and so no knock on it. It was
absolutely
just very
that's
long.
Definitely no knock on John. We love the Gospel of John. And there's a reason why we went through that book. But after that, or in the midst of that, I had many sermon series lined up.
Yeah.
But I wanted to really pray through and be prayerful. And, I wanted to thoroughly go through this before I make the decision to jump in any other sermon.
Sure.
And all the sermon series that I had planned, I didn't feel it. I was like praying about it, and I didn't feel like God was really pushing me toward that. So I just kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and this kind of fell on my lap. And the way you asked what inspired it, right? Well, number one, I'm always I try to be very in tune with our culture and our society and our world today.
Sure.
And given what's been going on with, I'm sure we'll probably touch upon a little later, but like love has been a topic that has been just kind of flippantly thrown out there. People express love differently. People define love differently. People have used love and abused love, you know, and it's love has taken its own meaning and in its own kind of, it's become its own.
Yeah.
And it just kind of is out there.
Sure.
And then I felt like as a Christian and as a believer, we have to get a grasp and a good understanding of it. And I felt like, well, right now seems to be the perfect time for us to rethink what love truly means, biblically speaking, and for us as Christians to exercise and express here today. So that's where the inspiration comes from.
Yeah. Which I think that the beginning part, I mean, in the beginning, you mentioned how you felt like foundations are being compromised more and more today, and that's something that we shouldn't be doing as Christians. That's something that you don't want. But you also mentioned specifically that you felt like the foundation of love is being compromised, as you are explaining now.
Right. So when I say the love or the foundation of love is being compromised, I think it's important for me to note and for our listeners to understand is that the foundation of love that we know as believers and as Christians is that God is love. And because God is being compromised, because God is being questioned, because God is being doubted, the essence of love has been distorted, corrupted, and therefore love is now taken on its own meaning in whatever the opinions and the feelings may be at the moment, and that's what love is in our culture today.
Yeah, and so I think that this might be a good time for you to give like a really short summary of the sermon. The main passage and the text, the example of love that you are showing us is from the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Adam and Eve, and you were using that to show the love that we have either relationally, right? And then you were also using it to express and show the love of God as well, right? And so give us a little bit of like a 2-minute summary of your whole
2 minutes.
I know it's hard, but you should practice it now so you can practice it up there on Sundays. No, I'm just kidding.
So this past Sunday, my wife did mention to me that the sermon was a little long.
I think there was just a lot of points that you were trying to go into, and obviously
I'll try to condense it. And I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. All right. So we spoke out of Genesis chapter 2, where it begins from God saying that Adam is in need of a helper. And the reason why he needs a helper, because God saw something in Adam that was not good.
Yeah.
And because of that not good in what God saw, that's where the whole title of the sermon, A Love That's Good, came from. And what interested me as I was reading through the passage and the scripture was that, all throughout God's creation, God is going, it was good. God created this, God created that. He saw and it was good. It was good, it was good, it was good. And not very long into the entire narrative of the creation, we're at chapter 2, verse 18, and God is already saying, not very good.
Yeah.
And what he saw was that he saw his creation that he made in his own image, a man, unable to experience the love that God had created. And that's what he did not like, and that's what was considered not good.
Yeah.
And then from there, God creates this helper that is fit for him, takes out of the man this rib, it says, and then from it creates woman who is perfect for him. And then there goes this display of what love of God looks like between two people. So the whole premise of the sermon was we have God's love. The love of God is expressed in the creation in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that God created the world, the heavens and the earth, and he did this, he did that. I mean, that's where we find his love.
Yeah.
But the love between two people is shown through God creating Adam and Eve in the way that he did, starting in chapter 2, verse 18.
Okay.
So my focus went from the essence of God's love, his creation, right, into the expression within two people.
Okay. A viewer just texted me right now, and he says, I'm a little lost. I'm not lost, but a viewer just texted me. And so can you just go into maybe further?
I just snorted.
maybe if you could just further explain how that ties together, the essence of God, like you just mentioned, and the what was the word?
Expression.
Expression of
Right,
love. Because I
right.
think I'm
Sure.
The viewer just texted me. They're a little lost of how how it relates to one another and how because it's two different entities, right? We have God, and then we have like man and relational, and so I think to try to connect it and put it together.
Sure. I'm sorry to tell you, the same viewer just texted me, and then and he said, "No, I did not say that." No, I'm just kidding. All joking aside, so the essence of love that I'm referring to is the love that represents who God is.
Okay.
Because in 1 John it tells us that God is love.
Yeah.
So God, at the very heart of who God is, that's what makes love. Love is God. God is love. That's the essence, right?
Yeah.
Now, we take that love and we have to apply that into our context and our setting, and our way of experiencing love is slightly different from what God can do. I mean, God's love is agape, as we know, right? It's unconditional. It's fully giving. The amount of grace, forgiveness, and mercy of God is unprecedented, and it's not comparable to anything that we can do.
Yeah.
Like our way of loving is nowhere close to what God can do.
Yeah.
But there is a shadow and a reflection of that essence, that love in us, and it can be shared between two people.
Yeah.
But that expression is slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's where I go into the breakdown of what God meant by a helper, the whole rib idea, and the whole how the idea of love is unbreakable, and that's where I broke it all down. So that will be the distinction between the essence of love and the expression of love.
I think the way that I'm understanding it is because if you look at another way, right? If like we're kind of like God should be the foundation of love, the example, the reason, the source of our love, because we can look at and find love from other things that we shouldn't be, right? And that's where it can get compromised.
Right.
That's where our love can get a little bit shaky and be like, oh, like this isn't real love. And I think that's kind of where you were.
Sure. I mean, you could definitely I think you're on the right track there.
Okay.
But we just need to make that distinction, a clear distinction of the essence of love means not something that God does or God has done. It's just who He is.
Yeah.
That's love. God is love. But we express it in our own way, and it's slightly different, and we want to reflect who God is.
So let me ask you this. Why and how do you think that us as people lose the essence of God, of love in our lives?
Sure. Well,
like, why did it get compromised? How did it get compromised? And where do we lose our way?
Yeah, this is going to be an easy answer, and it's something that I did mention. It's simply of our nature, our sinful nature, right? I think God intended for us to experience and go through that love the moment that He created woman, for two people to experience that. But when sin came into the world and man had fallen from God's grace and His glory, then that's when we, began corrupting that love. Because, sin literally separates us from God, right? Sin is the very thing that takes us away and further away from Him. And when we are separated from God, we are separated from that essence of love.
Yeah. And I think that I kind of want to throw you a little bit of a curveball here, just to spice up the podcast.
I'll determine
here.
whether or not I answer this or not.
So I think only because your main source of the text was Adam and Eve, which is man and woman married, husband and wife, right?
Right.
What about celibacy? I think that's a term that is biblical, right? We see people who are called into celibacy. What would you say about those people if we're talking about the essence of God and the expression of love? Like, how do people who are called into this, or called into celibacy, express that love?
Sure. Well, that's exactly what I mean by that expression of love. The beauty of expressing love is contingent upon who we are. Like each of us can express it differently.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation about raising children with another gentleman in our church. And we were talking about, how so many parents raise their children differently.
Yeah.
And yet, as parents, the love that we have for our children are the same. We all love our kids. Like, we would die for our kids. We would sacrifice for our kids. We will give everything and anything for our kids.
Yeah.
But you will notice that some parents are very tough on their kids, and we call that tough love. And then we have those parents that like to coddle their children, And when you have enough children within one family, you experience both. Like in my case, where my wife was really tough on our number one, but she's like totally coddling and bathing our number three. This is kind of like the running joke right now these days. So I just throw that in there. But that expression of love is different amongst every individual. So if the person believes and feels that they're called into this celibacy where, their life is not meant for him or her to be with another man or a woman and to live that kind of marriage setting and context, I think that's fine and that's okay. We clearly see that in the Bible. Apostle Paul being the number one, case study of that. And yet, did he love people? Did he experience love and express love?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Read his writing. Read the epistles. We know that he genuinely loved. And if I may, because this book doesn't get mentioned a lot, you look into the book of Philemon, right? We see just how much Apostle Paul loved this once slave that had run away, and therefore he expresses love of him to the slave owner, and asking him on his behalf to take him back, to forgive him, reconcile, and work this out. Yeah. So does Apostle Paul as a single man experience that love? I think so.
So it's not just confined to this love between
a man and a woman,
wife,
right,
a man and a woman, but it should be an expression of everywhere and everyone.
Right. That expression is different. Now, granted, in our sermon this past Sunday, our focus was on Adam and Eve, and therefore I expressed it between a man and a woman.
Yeah, in a very family-like kind of setting. But that's not the only love that we're going to be going into, right? And that's why it's a 4-part sermon series.
That's right. Next week, we'll go into in-law love between Ruth and Naomi.
Yeah.
That's going to be really exciting.
Yeah.
And then the week after that, I'm going to go into Joseph and Mary. And that one's really tough because we find Joseph loving his wife by wanting a divorce. And then I think that's unique.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something worth talking about. And then finally, we're going to cap it with Jesus and his bride, the church.
Yeah.
And then the sacrifice that Christ makes.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the real the essence of love gets, it explodes with Christ. So
so I think you're kind of hitting, all the major parts of love, and trying to make it, contextual for everyone, applicable. What would you say to the people, and just really quickly, what would you say to the people who are listening to these sermons who can't really relate in that way? For example, right, like we're talking about the essence of love and the expression. It should be not just man and wife or like husband and wife, but to everyone and everywhere. But specifically for this sermon, this Sunday it was for family. Next Sunday it's gonna be in-laws. Not everyone has that, or maybe even in mind, right? How are we supposed to take that in?
Right. To be honest, I hate to put it this way, and our listeners might be offended by it.
He doesn't care about us. He doesn't care.
But the onus is on them. And what I mean by that is the responsibility falls on the listeners to take what's in the scripture, take the teachings, and be able to apply that to their lives. Now, I do my best to kind of spread across. We have a huge range of
we do, and it's not
people.
easy.
So I can't always speak to every generation or every age group. But I think that all of us, we're smart enough to kind of dissect and figure out, okay, this makes sense to me. Or at the very least, they could think, okay, when I'm in that season of life, this I'll remember. This I'll know.
Yeah.
And then maybe I think that's kind of maybe this is a bad way for me to express it and explain it, but
Here, I'll save you. I'll save us here.
Okay.
Let me share how I took it as someone who's
good.
not.
That's right. I should have just I should have just went with that. Can we edit out
No. Let's keep it there. Actually, let's just put it to the part. Let's just clip it where like I don't care. No, I'm just kidding. For me, I took it in two ways. Number one, like you said, it was to prepare myself for that season so that when I do get in that season of, eventually getting married and having that responsibility, which we'll get into, right? The roles and responsibility between a husband and a wife. That really got me prepared and, thinking about, it's not just me, but it has to be a reflection and a source from God's love, what he showed us. But honestly, just for me personally, just knowing how we got to this point, that response song, Where the Love Lasts Forever, that really got me. Because for me, I just felt God's love where it is everywhere, right?
Man, we got to do a shout out when you mention that song, don't we?
Seriously.
Our drummer, her name is Jenny.
Yeah, shout out to Jenny. Just a quick shout out.
She loves that song. She wants to play. She's probably willing to play that song every week.
And I told her after service, I was like, Deaconess, that was the best response you could have, because I really felt like it brought everything together. I mean, the verses too, and it's talking about really the love of God. Yeah. And for that to be poured into me, like I want to pour that out, And so for speaking on behalf of people who are not in that season, or speaking on behalf of people who, may not feel that relatable, that's how I saw it. So I think you're absolutely right. There are people in different stages and people in different cultures and contexts of their lives. But in a way, we have to kind of take ownership of, our spirituality and say, how does this relate to me? How does this apply to me? Right. And so for me, that's how I was able to kind of be blessed by that as well.
I'm glad. I think you did a very good job.
I don't get paid enough for this one. No, I'm just kidding. But I am glad that you did bring up, a personal story of your family as well. And
what did I say?
You're talking about, your kids and how your wife was kind of a little bit tougher on your firstborn and now on your thirdborn. So the dynamics shift and dynamics change.
For sure.
And during your sermon, it seemed like you were really pushing for this idea, this egalitarianism. Right, this idea where man,
I wasn't. Okay, all right. Let me correct you there.
Man and woman, and all the men just got up and left, and you got death threats out. No.
All right, let me explain. So first of all, I did mention it not because I wanted to make a point in any way in the sermon, but rather I really wanted to talk about it here.
Yeah. Great.
So yes. So here it is. Begin. So I did not talk about the different roles between a man and a woman in the sermon, in the message. Yeah. That wasn't at all the purpose or my intent in any way, because I wanted to talk about just what love ought to look like from how God designed it, right? So that's what it was. Now, I did mention the term egalitarianism only because we live in a culture today where this is a hot topic and a hot debate.
For
sure. Within and amongst our Christian brothers and sisters, there is a huge disagreement between a group called complementarianists who believe that men and women are equal in value but different in role. And we have egalitarianists who believe that men and women are equal in value and in role. Now, our church and our denomination, we lean toward fully on the egalitarian side. We believe that men and women are equal and they can have the same roles. Therefore, we have women teachers, women leaders, women pastors. So we have them all. Now, how do we look at that and how do we understand that under the umbrella of God's holy divine love, right? Now, it's important to note, do men and women differ in role? Yes, absolutely. We are different in role but I'm not talking about like the complementarianism role. So don't fret, everyone.
They're going to clip it right there. They're going to end it. Show's over. Good night.
When I say we're different in role is that we have different ways in which we have been created. Like I was talking to a brother where I was mentioning, of course, we're different in certain roles, right? Like moms are more nurturing, dads are less nurturing. However, can it be other way around? Yes. Yeah, of course we can. I actually know a lot of guys who are more nurturing sometimes than their wives.
You know, there's actually a scientific study on that. I don't know the full exact specific details, but I'm sure people who are listening who know of it are gonna get the gist of it. But they did a study on the mother's what's that like that hormone called, like I think serotonin or something. It's a very like motherly love, like nurturing like hormone, and they were comparing that levels to when she's with the baby, when she's not, and then they brought over a single father with the child and without the child, that father was comparatively a lot lower than the mother, but when the single father was with the child, it was almost the same as the mother, single mother. And so just like you're saying, we biologically we can definitely.
No, for sure. I mean, and I didn't think that way because I don't know those scientific
That's
details.
just the one thing I remember college. The only thing. The only thing.
But, I kind of thought this through and I was like, in this world that we live in, there are 7 billion people.
Yeah.
There's got to be a case where where a guy is a little more nurturing than the woman sometimes, Mine was a little more elementary than your logic there. But no, but we see it around us.
For sure.
And yes, in a majority sense, if we want to just kind of like do a blanketed statement, are women more nurturing? Sure. Are men more the other side? Sure. We could kind of say it in that way, but at the end of the day, I believe that yes, we have these different roles, but it doesn't limit them from doing what the other person or the other gender is doing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that it's important to know. I remember taking a class on this in seminary. I know it's rare for me to bring up seminary classes, but I
You're
learned.
paying attention.
I had to do a reading on it, unfortunately. But I remember there was a part of it talking about the roles back then biblically between a man, a husband, and a wife, and there it was just completely very just like strict.
Right. It was like established by the culture and society.
Exactly, and that was a long time ago, right? Like I think the father, the man was supposed to be the decision maker, the leader, and everything must go through him and from him and everything. And the mother back then, it was very like nurturing and taking care of the family and making sure there's food on the table and stuff like that.
Sure,
right?
sure.
But now, obviously, times have changed. It's been a long, long time since then. And so when we talk about, if we talk about roles of family, that's a whole nother podcast, a whole other episode.
But let me mention this because I want to be honest and I want to use me as an example and not try to point finger at outside.
Yeah.
Like in my household, and you know this obviously, but
we're skipping ahead. That was one of my questions, but yes, please go on.
In my household, like my wife is one of those that truly and genuinely honors me as a husband and as a father.
No doubt.
She wants to put me on a pedestal. Even on behalf of my kids, so that they will know. Like I remember jokingly, my wife was
scared when you start off with like disclaimer. I was just joking, like that.
Jokingly,
just be careful. People can clip things on the internet, but please go on.
Okay. Jokingly, everyone, and I'll continue to repeat this so that in between I'll say it so that it can't be used against me. But jokingly, my wife would like tell the kids like, it's like, who's dad? What is he? Like kind of a title that we kind of taught them. Yeah. And the kids, we taught them to say, dad is king, jokingly, right? Now, it was just a thing that we used to laugh about. We used to have fun about because this was part of my wife and I. We would talk about this kind of stuff. Yeah. And she is one of those individuals that truly gives me that kind of podium and that stage and that just kind of position. Yeah. So I appreciate. But here's the thing. The thing that is distinguishable within us is that I don't sit there and go, okay, you've put me in this position, so now I'm going to make all these decisions and everything goes through me. Yeah. And yada, yada, yada. That's not how it works. When it comes to certain matters, oh yeah, I make the decision. And I believe that I am best suited and fit for that decision.
Yeah.
But trust me when I tell you, if I were to do that for everything, we will all not live more than 20 years at the most. Because I love a lot of greasy food. And if I were to decide on everything that we ate, and we eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, our kids will go hungry and we will not survive.
There are a lot of stories of you choosing greasy foods over healthy foods, over the direct orders of your wife. And so the listeners believe you. Don't worry.
So it is important. But that's just like a small example.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, I talk to my wife and I give her the freedom to make certain decisions, obviously. And I shouldn't have said it that way. That makes it seem like, I'm giving her the, But I hope you understand what I mean, right? She makes decisions on certain matters that I know is better than me.
Yeah.
Whether that is what gets put on the dinner table or maybe it's regarding our kids on what is best for them, or sometimes even in ministry, when I go through a trouble or a conflict and I'm not quite sure how to go about it, I come to her for help and I listen, and then she guides me and helps me. So listen, yes, we have different roles, but it doesn't mean it's not interchangeable. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think the people who do know you and your wife can definitely, attest for that. And in reality, the people who really know you and your wife and your relationship know who's really in charge. So you don't have to worry about that. We really know who has the power. So you don't have to worry about that. Maybe you were talking about the equal roles because maybe you feel like you're the lesser.
I was literally just about to bring this up because one of the church members after sermon came to me and she was like, she and I were just kind of laughing and talking and chit-chatting about the message. And I'm like, aren't you disappointed because her husband didn't come this past Sunday?
Yeah.
And I'm like, isn't this something that you wanted him to hear? And she goes, no, I'm actually glad that he's not here. I'm like, why? Because I'm the boss in the house. And if he heard it, he's going to be like, you see, we're all equal and we're even.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of those cases.
We have a lot of strong individuals in our church for sure. But people who know, they know what's really going on over there. So you don't got to worry about that. Yeah. But I think I really like that. Let's talk about a little bit of the role in terms of, you brought up the term helper.
Yes.
Right? And you went deep. You went into the roots of it, into what it really means and where we got it from. Can you go a little bit into where we see that word helper and then what it relates to?
Sure. I could be butchering the passage. I do know that it's from Hosea. Was it Hosea?
You did say Hosea, but you're talking about when, let's just first clear it. God made Eve to be the helper of Adam, right?
So the way that I kind of formulated that part of the message was that there are people out there who take the term helper and use that as a term that diminishes the role of the woman, right? Like a helper, an assistant almost. Someone who's not as valuable as man. But when we look deep into the original language of what Hebrew means, I believe the Hebrew word was, and I could be butchering the pronunciation, but it's like izar, right? It's easy.
Nobody will know. It's okay. Nobody knows.
All right. But that word is the same word that gets used in Hosea. I believe it was chapter 12, 13, I'm not sure. Somewhere around there that is used in reference to God being a helper. And it's the same word.
Wow.
So we know just by that comparison, the word helper does not denote a lower, subordinate, inferior. It's not that kind of meaning at all.
Yeah.
So that's one way of knowing that there is equality in the value of man and a woman. Mm-hmm. Now, I also went into the word rib, because that's also another way in which some people in the past have justified why men is greater than women, because a woman was made from a rib of a man. Yeah. It has this kind of language of, I'm better, I'm greater, I came first before you type of deal, right? And people have used that against each other. But when you look at the Hebrew word for rib as well, which is selah, the spelling is T-S-E-L-A,
Yeah.
not Selah that we see the pause in
in the
Psalms.
Psalms and stuff.
Yeah, but Selah, and that word is wonderful because that word literally is shown in expressing a even and equal division, evenly dividing. And we see it in reference to the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the temple, and also the Jerusalem. So we see this term being used in dividing the two evenly from a united whole. So that's another way of us understanding that is not some way in God somehow God is not this misogynistic God where he's like, all right, men is better than women, you know?
Yeah.
No, it's an even and equal value in both.
Yeah, and I feel like we're treading kind of on some dangerous waters here because we're going into, like you said, hot topics of society, right? Like gender roles and all that. But I think it's very, very interesting. I mean, I don't think a lot of people knew that. Obviously,
Sure.
we don't know the roots and the translations and where it can relate from. So I think it's very important that you brought that up.
Yeah,
that
man.
it relates to God and what one of his roles were, and it's not to say that he's inferior, it's not that he's a subordinate to us, but in reality, it's, he's
Right.
far greater. And so I think it's very interesting to see how that relates and how those two put together. But it's just like, now knowing that, it's like, how can people say otherwise? You know what I mean? Like,
Right. It's
I don't want to go too deep into that or too
Sure.
far into that, but it just for
Sure.
me, it's like, are there people who are aware of that and still say things otherwise?
Well, that's why I started out by saying bad theology makes bad people.
Yeah.
And this is a term that gets thrown around in the whole YouTube hemisphere.
Yeah.
Right? And when I heard that, I was like, this is so true.
Yeah.
Bad theology makes bad people.
Yeah.
And because we have the nature of being sinful and we are sinners, when we view one another as one greater than the other, one higher than the other, then our nature will inevitably lower and diminish and oppress and suppress the other individual. So that's unfortunately the nature of who we are. And this is why we have to rethink love.
Yeah.
Now, going back to it, and I think that was sort of the point that I wanted to make, is that we need to understand love from the very original point of God creating this and establishing this.
Yeah.
Because he did so in a way where he created us equal and even, so that when we fall in love with each other and when we are capable of loving each other, is that we are to show each other that love of evenness and equality.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm reminded because we just had our membership class fresh 2 days ago. And in one of the parts of the membership class, we talked about serving and the love that Jesus has shown us, right? Like the last to be first and the first to be last, right? Does this contradict this idea of not equality, but equality of love and being able to treat each other fairly? Or should we be striving to serve and to be less than the person?
I think these are two different. I think we're just trying to bring things together. I think that question, because humility and being a servant doesn't mean you're less, as in like you're less valuable.
Yeah.
Right. Like for example, when Jesus decided to wash the feet of his disciples, did that somehow make him a lesser in value in any kind of way? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Clearly he humbled himself because that role has that sort of connotation. He used that to express this servant-like love, right? This humility love, right? Unto the people. But that was just an expression of it, but it doesn't devalue the individual, being the last, being a servant. No, you're still valuable, and the love is equal all the way around.
Yeah, I think that really defines it and makes it distinct in that it's like not it's the value of the person that is the same and of equal, and I think that's very important to to know. And I think you mentioned, bringing different things together, and that made me think, and biblically, aren't there like different kinds of love? And like there's like agape love. There's like there's
filio. There's eros.
Yeah.
There is what's the other one? I'm blanking out. There's four.
I know there's four, but do you think that we're going to need to know that, or we want to go into that for the sermon series, or are we gonna...
I definitely do think we're going to touch upon the filio this upcoming Sunday, because it's this love that happens between Ruth and Naomi, and Naomi is the mother-in-law of Ruth, right? Like, I'm sure you're familiar, and our listeners are familiar, and on Sunday when I kind of go into it, people will come to know it's such it starts off as such a tragic story.
Yeah.
So Naomi, if you didn't know, had two sons, right, with her husband, and her husband had died, and her two sons had died.
Yeah.
And her two sons had wives, one being Ruth and one being Orpah.
Yeah.
Not Oprah.
Yeah.
Orpah. It's so funny. I don't know if I want to share this, because I was gonna use this as a joke in the sermon, but I really I used to think Oprah was a biblical name. Like when I was a kid, because I just saw this word. And then I remember thinking, because back in the 90s and early 2000s, Oprah Winfrey was such a big person. She's an icon, right? I'm like, wow, she's so blessed because she has a biblical name. You know, I used to have that childlike thinking.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's beside the point. But Ruth and Orpah is the two daughter-in-laws. So when she loses all the male in her family, she is left alone as a widow.
Yeah.
She has nothing to give. And she informs both of her daughters-in-law to go back to their homes and to go back to their kinsmen and go live your lives back in your hometown.
Yeah.
Now, Orpah took that very logically and said, this makes sense. This is what I ought to do. And she goes. Yeah. But right there, Ruth says no. And she expresses this filial type, this brotherly type love between not a man and a woman, but between these two individuals, where she says, I will go where you go. Your God will be my God.
Yeah.
I mean... So we'll definitely touch upon that kind of love. I don't know if I will use that Greek word at all, but maybe I will. But that's something that gets talked about. And
I think that plays into like different expressions of love, right? Like what we were saying, like there is like the relational type. There's the loyalty, the brotherly type, and there are all these other types. But I think what's really important is that we know what the essence comes from, where the foundation, the main source of our love and our inspiration. And that brings me to, I guess, our final question. And this is a question that I'm not sure if you're prepared for or if you might know, but like we said, that verse from 1 John, God is love. And I've heard this said in a couple other places and times, but like one of the most famous love passages is which one?
John 3:16?
The next one after that one.
Next one after John 3:16?
Yeah.
Most famous?
Yeah. I'm quizzing you.
I can do all things through Christ who
strengthens me. Okay, never mind. This works better with my kids our Sunday school. The 1 Corinthians chapter 13, love is patient, love is patient.
Kind, okay, we were in the topic of love, right? Okay, I should have stayed in that lane. But.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I should have said that. Yes, but that passage we all know. It describes what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. It's not envy. It does not boast.
Look at you. Keep going.
I think I could do it, but for the sake of our viewers and the time, I'll stop it there. But I've heard people interchange love and God. Because God is love, love is God, right? And so I would hear, God is patient, God is kind. God, is that theologically correct? And also, a very popular song, Love Came Down and Set Me Free, Love Came Down, I Am Yours. God came down and rescued me.
So it depends on, that's a great question, by the way.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no is because it depends on what love are we talking about. So if we're talking about that essence, then is it interchangeable? Yes, because God is love and love is God. Yeah. And therefore, can we say God is patient, God is kind, God does not envy, God does not boast? Yeah, sure. But, but if we're using a different understanding or different definition of love,
Yeah.
then no, then absolutely not. You know,
It's because I get a little bit confused, honestly, because when I read that, it makes sense to me. God is patient, God is kind. But then there's that one line where it says, love does not get jealous.
So let me put it this way, and maybe we'll get to that point. You know how in our society today, instead of using "I love you," people say "I heart you."
Yeah.
Heart and love is kind of interchangeable.
Yeah,
We can't
yeah.
say "I got you."
Yeah.
Okay, you get my point, right?
Yeah, I actually was thinking that. I was like, wait, what?
Like, where are you going with this?
I was like, can I say I got you?
Yeah, because that love when I say to my wife, "I love you."
Yeah.
It's a different expression of love. It's not the essence of who God is. So I can't. No, it's not interchangeable.
Yeah, but when we talk about the essence of God, God is love, love is God. That we can interchange. But when it comes to, okay. So I'm tracking with you, and I think that's good clarification as well. And I think I'll end with this one. I know I said that was the final one, but this one, when it talks at the end of that passage. I think it was like love hopes all things, endures all things, something all things, and then it says the greatest, like love, faith, and hope, but the greatest of these is love.
Yeah.
Right. What does that say about love? Like, is it better? Is it greater than hope, than faith? Should we only have love? Do we only need love? Like, what is? I think we should end with that.
Sure. So that text. Now, I think what we're hearing from that text is kind of like when Apostle Paul talks about all these spiritual gifts. But above all spiritual gifts, I desire that you want to seek prophecy or things like that, right? Like it doesn't mean, are they all valuable and are they all important? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But to pinpoint and say, well, this is still better. This is still greater. I don't think that's the point of the text.
Yeah.
Right. But I think it was more of an emphasis on what love is, more of an emphasis on what that entails and what that brings, because from love is where everything flows out of. Right. If there is no love, then what can there be? Yeah. Can there be hope? Can there be faith? Can there be this and that? Why? Because God is love, right? So I think it was more so an emphasis on it, not in saying that it's greater in value than the others. It's kind of like when the disciples asked, well, what's the greatest commandment?
Yeah.
Yeah. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and love your neighbors. Like, okay, then am I supposed to love the neighbors more or God more? Like it's just more of an emphasis, right?
Yeah. It's not like a real value, like a
correct,
value.
Correct. It's not like
a
priority list,
sure.
Like a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It's not like that.
Yeah. And I think this sermon series, I mean, I was excited for it, and I still am, because I think this idea where we have compromised our foundation, especially with love. I mean, I think anybody listening and anybody keeping track with what's going on today can definitely see a big shift in the way that us, especially as Christians, we see love. I mean, we can go on, and you are going to go on and on about this for the next 3 weeks and probably longer. And so I think it is something that we need to, as believers, as Christians, to hold on to, and to be able to really rethink what we know and what we have in our hearts as what love is, because I think, like you were saying, it's very, very important.
Yeah.
And so I hope, for at least the next 3 weeks, as we continue on and rethinking what love is and restructuring, really even, can we even say deconstructing? No, I'm just kidding. Restructuring.
That's another topic for another day.
Restructuring what love is and where it comes from, who it needs to be, right? Mm-hmm. God is love. I think it's very important. And so we're looking forward to the next episode. Maybe not even next sermon, the next episode. We're more excited for the next episode than we are for the sermon. But with that being said, I do want to say one thing to our listeners. A couple of our questions actually came from our viewers, because they were asking questions and they were listening and they were having questions and they were kind of not tracking along, or they're confused and they want to go deeper and deeper. If you're listening and you have questions or you want us to talk about something that relates to this sermon, this topic, please come speak to us. I think it really opens up our eyes to see, okay, what do our listeners need to hear, rather than what do they want to hear or what do they hear all the time. Is what do they need to hear in this season, in this time where we're rethinking love together as a church. And so if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, we highly encourage you, please come and ask us questions. Give us feedback on the content of this episode and all the next episodes, because we want this again to be a learning episode content for all of us. It's not just for media, it's not just for entertainment, but we really hope, and I mean, that's the reason why we're investing so much into this, because we feel like we're going with the times where we're doing in a theologically and in a transformational way. As a supplement to the gospel, to the word that's being brought up there. We want to make sure that we cover and go into things that we don't cover all of the spectrum of what our past experiences have. And so if there are members who can give us more of that insight, I think that would be really helpful for this podcast, for this content. And so once again, if you are listening and you have questions, you have things that spoke out to you, please share with us. Let us know. We are so excited, and we would love to go into that and shout you out, maybe even if it was so great, so revelationary, a revelation. I don't know. It's time to end this. It's time to end this. And so we are so thankful for our supporters. We are so thankful for the people who are listening and really support us. We hope that this episode has really inspired you to rethink what love is and who God is and how much He truly loves us.
Amen.
And I think with that being said, we pray that you guys have a blessed week. Have a blessed week until we see you guys this Sunday and until next week for this episode. And so, how about you close us out?
I thought you were about to close out and you just handed over to me.
You just gotta say goodbye and then that's it.
Well, in that case,
we're getting back into the rhythm of it. We need an intro and outro. We're getting there.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.